thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I'm delighted that we got Jenny with us. Jenny helped me when I was running the agency, and that seems a long time ago now, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Coming in and actually helping us identify sort of the characteristics within the team. We used something called 5 Voices, which I don't think we're going to talk about today, but it was something that was really useful for us. But we were talking a week or so ago, and it's, you know, in this time of crisis, you know, it's amazing how different people will react in different ways, and a lot of it is down to personality, and a lot of it is, you know, and it's understanding when we're talking to people exactly what that means to us all. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jenny. Jenny's going to introduce herself far better than I can. And I think we're going to have a bit of an interactive session. Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
So over to you.
Thank you. I have got some notes, just because I didn't want to do one of those formal share your screen type PowerPointy things. So I have got a couple of notes. So forgive me if I look down occasionally, but most of it will be without doing that. So I say I'm Jenny. My company's called Genuine Consulting, and I help people. I called it Mind Their Shine. So that thing, whether that's leading in your own shoes, or finding a role that plays to your strengths, or building your own business, or just improving your communication skills and increasing your influence. That's what I do. And the root of all those things, to help you be at your most brilliant, is understanding who you are. And so if you think about understanding who you are, actually it's what I describe as a lifetime's adventure. It certainly doesn't happen overnight, and it can be quite a challenge to explore or mine those aspects of your personality that you don't like very much, or that you'd rather keep hidden from the world. But actually, quite often, the world can see them leaking out, even if you can't. So that's what I help people do. I'm a coach, a Myers-Briggs practitioner. I don't know if most have probably heard of Myers-Briggs, that looks at, and many people have been damaged by Myers-Briggs and other personality tests, which is why I'm not going to focus on that today. But what I did want to think about was communication. And it's one of those things, there's 2 words I'm going to use that are very overused at the moment. Communication is one of them. And you can see people thinking, oh yeah, we know all about communication. We're communication specialists. That's what we do. We all speak the same language, right? Do we?
No, we don't.
If only it were that easy. So communication is one of those things that's really easy to say and really, really hard to do well. And I was going to ask you guys what you thought. I have some thoughts, but I was going to ask you what you think gets in the way of good communication. What stops us?
Or not listening.
Not listening, yeah. That's checking understanding, isn't it, when you feed back to somebody? So I'm checking that what I heard you say is what you meant to say, and that we're saying the same thing to each other. Yeah, there's been many a big hole from that. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
Reading body language, like if you're over the phone, you can't see someone's body language, so that can be a blocker sometimes, but you can pick up on other things. So,
and with that on the phone, it's things like tone, isn't it? So you can say the same words, but the tone with which you say them can alter the way that somebody else interprets them.
Yeah, which goes the same as like text and emails. If you look at Facebook, like how I mean, people can come across so angry or completely different, and I think like people, especially on social media, interpret things the wrong way because of other things they've read.
It might be the mood that I'm in. I could read something on a Monday morning when I've had a fabulous weekend and think, yeah, that's a fabulous piece of writing. By Wednesday at lunchtime, when I've just had a client who's given me an earful because I've interpreted their brief incorrectly, because I didn't clarify, I could read it in a whole different way. Communication isn't as easy as we think, is it? And the other thing, the other overused word that I wanted to talk about today is love, which isn't possibly a topic that you would think you would automatically use in a in a networking meeting. But I'm very mindful, and Emma, you mentioned social media first, but obviously there is a lot. As I said earlier, that dark and shade, the good bits and the bad bits, the bit that we like, the bit that we don't. I don't want to dwell on George Floyd, but there's a lot of hate going on in the world right now. There's a lot of people writing about how they feel based on things that they've read, reactions that they've got from somebody else, all of that stuff. There's a lot of hate out there. So I thought it would be nice to think about the opposite of hate, which is love, from the point of view of how we communicate. And I don't know if any of you are familiar, so I'm going to use another 5. Chris knows I like my 5s. I'm going to use the 5 love languages. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those. So I use 5 love languages a lot. The man who wrote it originally is a guy called Gary Chapman. He wrote it originally about marriage, actually, but it can be applied in all sorts of business contexts. So I thought it'd be useful to just whiz you through them. So the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. I think of love as a bit like if you think of it as an emotional bank account. Right from when we're children, we're born with this emotional bank account, this love account, and you fill it up by the way that people express love for you. And psychologists have long, it's become accepted wisdom that the need to be loved is a fundamental emotional human need. Everybody needs it. But the way that we express it, the way that we receive it, and the way that we express it is different. And there's an assumption that, it's the same for everybody, which has led to, over the centuries, so many misunderstandings I couldn't even begin to count. So what I wanted to think about today was just thinking about how understanding what your primary love languages are. Out of those 5, I'll go through them and give you some examples of each of them. And what I'd like you to do is to think about which are the ones that resonate most with you, so that you can kind of put them in order. There'll be ones that you go, oh, that's me. Oh, I do. Oh, that's me. That's me. Oh, that's just me. And there'll be ones you go, really? Oh. So the first one is words of affirmation, and that's about being able to give compliments. So telling somebody something positive, which again sounds really easy, but in order to tell something positive that is meaningful, what do you have to do?
Believe it.
Yeah, believe it. But in order to express it, what do you have to know? Because it's not about you, it's about the other person. So if you're telling somebody, you're expressing something positive about them, what is it you have to do? in order
observe
to
them. You've got to observe them over time.
observe, notice.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention.
Experience.
So that thing about, oh yeah, you look great, you always look great, isn't the same as, wow, I've noticed you've cut your hair, or you've changed your car, or whatever it is. So in order to tell somebody something that's positive, means that you actually have to pay attention, you have to notice. And when we're busy or when we're under stress, actually the noticing can be quite hard to do, because we're much more interested in noticing ourselves, because at heart we're all egocentric, so we think the world revolves around us. That's not a judgment, that's how it is. So it's really easy to be really good at noticing yourself, but not quite so good at noticing other people. And another thing about words of affirmation, it might be that you're offering somebody who is feeling a bit despondent or finding it tough, your kids want to go out and play in the park and they can't, they're missing their friends at school. Your mother's going, but I don't understand why you can't come and see me, I'm fine. And actually what you want to do is give words of encouragement. But in order to give words of encouragement, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the person on the other side. So just going to your mum who's shut by herself in a house and she can't go anywhere because she's got the shielding letter, she can't, you can't just go, oh, never mind, it's fine, you're fine. Actually, she's not fine. She doesn't feel fine. So in order to give her words of affirmation that are encouraging, you have to put yourself in their shoes to see it from their perspective. Otherwise, it just sounds like you're kind of patting them on the head, doesn't it? They're there. Oh, you'll be fine. They're there. It'll be okay. And back to what Emma, you said at the beginning, that tone. So kindness. It's not just what you say; it's how you say it. So those words of affirmation are really important.
I taught my 3 sons to say, "You've got great hair," and but they say it all the time at the wrong time.
So that's a great thing, David. That other thing is about actually the timing of it. So if my mum cut her fringe last week because she couldn't stand it any longer, and I did suggest that she might want to watch a YouTube video, and she said no, I'll be fine. And I think she just got a pair of kitchen scissors and hacked it, and she looks like the bottom of a spring onion. But I can't say to her. She said, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Well,
it was a spring onion once."
I'm very fond of spring onions, but that's what you remind me of. So it's that being kind and saying well.
So does ringing up my wife when she's on the way back from the hairdresser, telling her how nice her hair is, does that not count?
No.
No.
No. You have, and also that thing about if you have to wait for somebody to say there's something different about me you haven't noticed, that's a bit late too quite often.
Yeah. And you're not allowed to say nice toupee.
And it's also that thing about if somebody if you hear a thing you haven't noticed, then actually it might be a sign that somebody has a different love language than, you might have weeded the garden. We'll come back to that later. You might have weeded the garden, replumbed the shower, but actually if that's not their love language, it doesn't have the same impact as you might think. Words of affirmation is the first one. Quality time is as you would expect. When you are giving somebody your undivided attention, your focused presence. It's not slumping on the TV, both watching the same programme with the TV, and you've given them the TV remote. That's not quality time. Don't count. It's not about phoning or doing a Zoom call and going, yeah, typing at the same, I'll be with you in a minute. you know, it's not multitasking. Quality time is actually that thing about being 100% present. So all the other worries that you've got, and again, in a crisis situation, it can be really hard because you're juggling, aren't you? Your head's full of stuff. What if? I'm not sure about, oh, what's they going to say today? What are they going to, who's going to, can I get flour? Is there any eggs? All of that you're juggling lots and lots of things. So actually making time for people to have that quality time is really important. And
Do you think there's a problem with falling into Americanisms that people misinterpret?
yeah,
Because it's a bit like "have a nice day." When I first heard that, I thought that's so stupid, and it now creeps into the British culture. Like the word movie used to be filming, you know, quality time. You know, was something I heard at Microsoft back in 1995 or something. So is there not, you know, is that a trap?
I think again it's about exactly what we've been talking about. It's about making sure that you understand what you mean by quality time and what we're saying about quality time. You can say, if you don't like the word quality time, you're saying actually that it's about, because it's more than, it is undivided attention. It's giving somebody your undivided attention.
Yeah.
And what that means is it's having real conversations. So it's about mining, back to my mining again, mining underneath the surface. So it's more about what you're hearing. It might be what they're not saying. It's about what you're hearing and kind of delving a bit deeper. And you can't do that if you're not 100% present. If most of your head's thinking about what's for tea or what's on the telly tonight, you're not going to be able to hear with the same level of attention. And if I can give you an example back to those personalities, you've got the personalities who are, I could describe them like a lake, calm, smooth, and so they receive the information and it sinks to the bottom of the lake, but they don't necessarily feel the need to communicate it. So it's all in there. Another way of describing it may be somebody who has a preference for introversion. So they take that information from the outside world, they take it inside to that deep pool, and it's all catalogued and it's all in there, but they then don't share it back out. And then the other side of that is the kind of babbling brook, and they'll tell you everything. They'll talk loads. So if you have a date, if you're going on out, or you're going out with a friend, and one of you is the pool, and the other one's the babbling brook, you might have a great night because the pool, fabulous at listening, takes all that information in, doesn't have to worry about whether there's going to be awkward silences or how to fill the evening, because the babbling brook will have got that covered. The babbling brook has a great evening because they've just talked, and those words go like stones, waterfall, and the pool's just listened. So they've both had a great time, but over a period of time, those friendships can be eroded because the pool doesn't get time. But what about me? There's no time for them to talk. So in those situations, what we have to learn to do, so understanding whether you're a deep pool or a babbling brook, means that you can start to go, oh, actually, there's a timing thing. There are times when I need to be more like the pool and less like the brook, and the other way round. And personality isn't about saying you're one or the other and that's it, you're stuffed. You can't alter your behavior. What it means is recognizing which is the thing that you're most good at. So if you're naturally a pool, how can you, it might feel a bit awkward when you first start behaving like a brook, people might go, oh goodness. But it takes practice, and it also takes courage. So it's about understanding that if you say to somebody, if you could tell a babbling brook to shut up, you know, in situations like this, if you're naturally somebody who, when there's silence, your immediate comfort is to, I have to say something, because what if nobody says anything? It'll be really uncomfortable. Oh, so you leap in. Those are all the babbly brooks. The deep pools are just listening, taking it all in, and just thinking about it. But actually, if you're a pool, we might not know what you think. You might be bored out of your head. So tell us, you know, it's that kind of, otherwise we make assumptions. So that is quality time. I'm conscious that if I don't use my time wisely, I'll run out of it. The next love language is receiving gifts. And obviously a gift is something that you can, as a recipient, you can hold in your hand, and think, this person was thinking of me, they get me, they were thinking of me. It reminded them. This isn't necessarily about expensive things. It's that sharing of their understanding, or that they thought of you.
Chris, did you get the beer? Chris, did you get the beer from Rebellion?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
See, I was thinking of you.
Yes.
That was my idea.
That was your idea, was it? Well,
Yeah,
it was
Nick.
a very good one. And I was just about to mention that as a prime example. So on, when was it? Saturday, knock at the door, and on the doormat is 4 bottles of Rebellion beer for me.
There you go.
Right.
So, and how did it feel when you got the thought, somebody cares about me, somebody's been thinking about me?
Yeah, exactly. It was
And
a
we
very
actually
good touch.
we didn't give Chris any clue as to who it was from.
Apart from somebody asking me for my address the day before.
Ah, well, that was a giveaway. You've been watching Poirot.
And of course, there's the argument that actually gifts don't necessarily have to be, this is where it gets complicated, they don't necessarily have to be things. It can be the gift of yourself, can't it? The gift of your time. So it gets slightly, but usually it's about a gift. And it might be something really little, but it's about showing that you've thought of them. The next one is acts of service. And acts of service are about doing something for somebody that that you know that they would like you to do. So I had a friend, a great friend, who we were talking about her husband, and she said, he's not the most romantic of men, but you know, every winter morning he gets up early and he makes sure that my car's defrosted and warm, so that when I go to work, I don't have to get into a cold car and defrost it. And I said, oh, that's lovely. That's so kind. And she went, is it? I said, yes, that's an act of service. And she said, well, he's always done it, so I kind of take it for granted. So it's like, oh, actually, that's him. You know, she said, he never buys me flowers. I said, no, but he always makes sure your car's well. Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, but I'd really like it if he bought me flowers. I said, does he know that you'd really like him to buy you flowers? She said, well, no, he should just know that, shouldn't he? I was like, oh, should he? How should he know that? Well, I hint occasionally. So that brings me on to another thing about those languages is, you know, I said at the beginning, we all speak the same language, but then actually there's dialects, isn't there? So people who live in Birmingham and people who live in Liverpool and people who live in Manchester have different words for the same thing. So actually, acts of service is a really good example of how you could have two people for whom their primary love language was acts of service, but actually they're speaking in different dialects, And that was a really good example. So for my friend, her act of service would include, you know, bringing her flowers. From his perspective, his dialect was making sure her car's warm. But you can still have a mismatch, even if you're speaking essentially the same language. So thinking about having those conversations about what do acts of service look like, and about the difference between requesting and demanding. You never do the washing up. Why do I always have to do the washing up? You never put the bins out. I put the bins. So the difference between, so an act of service is doing something. If you know that somebody that you care about really hates doing whatever it is, and it's easy for you to do it, then why wouldn't you? But they might be oblivious to the fact that you've done that. If it's not their love language, they might not even see it. It's like, you know, Russian. So thinking about, and also there's acts of service. Be careful that, I'm sure we can all think of examples where acts of service are used almost as manipulation, as a threat. If you really loved me, you'd put the bins out, or whatever it is. That's manipulation. So acts of service is not about being a doormat. And you can use, again, we're talking about personal stuff because we've all been stuck at home, but you can use exactly the principles are the same in the office, in a work environment. If you were a really good manager, you'd let me have my holiday next week. So you use that kind of, if you were really good at this, then you would, whatever. That's manipulation. So beware of that. And I think we're all tempted, aren't we, at times, back to that egocentric. It's easy to manipulate when you want your own way. So back to those, mining those bits of you that you think, oh, actually, I don't like that about myself quite as much. So think about that. And the last love language is physical touch. And again, we know that from babies, physical touch is an innate human need, and that if you deny or withdraw human touch from humans, they don't flourish. So we need touch. And if you think about back to that crisis, in a crisis, what's the first thing we want to do in a crisis? If you see somebody, sorry, Tanya?
Hug someone.
Hug.
And I'm really missing not being able to hug people. Obviously I can hug my child and my husband, but I can't even give my mum a hug at the moment. So it's really tough.
Yeah. And I think this, that physical touch is the love language, which is the only one, or it's the one that there is no, you can't do it in lockdown. There is no replacement. And I think also it's that thing about balancing. So for some people in lockdown, they have been denied access, what I call three-dimensional access to other human beings. So there's people who are self-isolating or, live on their own. So actually not having physical contact is really, really hard. And if that's your primary love language, then basically, essentially, you've been robbed of your speech. So it is really difficult. And there's an assumption that if you're a bubbly brook type of person, that actually you'll be okay. But actually, you might not. So, and even if you think about, we've got people who have been isolated. We've got the other end where we've got people who are living with other human beings all the time, and they've got no space. So it's sometimes really hard. One of my friends the other day said, "Oh, would you like my child? Because I'm homeschooling and all the rest of it. They're in my face." 17 hours of the day, and I'd really like somebody else to have them right now. It's hard for somebody, and somebody else was saying that's really hard for me to hear, because actually I can't see my children right now. So actually, you know, you offering to give your child away, which I understand, back to the empathy about understanding different people's languages. They'll communicate in different ways. So if you think about physical touch, it's really hard, and there's no replacement, is there? As Tanya said, there's no replacement for that. So in lockdown, you can still do words of affirmation. In fact, words of affirmation might be all you've got. You can still do words of affirmation. You can still do quality time. You can still do acts of service. You can still do gifts, but you can't do physical touch. Most of us have, out of those 5, most of us will have a top 2.
Top two in relation to how we act to others, or how we
both.
expect
It's
others
the
to
so
react to us?
usually your primary love language is the way that you like to show love to other people, and also you like to receive it. So it's both. It's both. So if you're somebody who, if the time you thought, oh, quality, that's it, that's me, I really value that, it's likely to be the way that you show it, you demonstrate it. So you might be somebody who, you know, always make sure that they go to see their friends on their birthdays, that plan to spend time, that you remember that your mum likes a particular garden centre, and you would spend time there. You know, it's the way that you would demonstrate that you love somebody, we tend to do from using our primary language. And what happens is that we tend to assume that everybody's the same as us. And so quite often, I was working actually with a couple recently, and they the wife's primary love language was quality time, and her husband's was act of service. So he was saying, we have a fabulous, I don't know why she's miserable, we have a fabulous house, we have a fabulous car, we go on great holidays, you know, there's plenty of money in the bank, why is she miserable? And she said, because you're never here. And it turned out that he worked away. So he would leave home at 4:30 on a Monday morning, and he would get back at kind of 9 o'clock on a Friday night.
Oh my God.
So essentially during the week, Monday to Friday, she was a single parent with 3 kids.
That's tough.
And she said, I'd rather have, but for him, what his primary love language was acts of service. He was providing all the things that he thought were really demonstrating how much he loved her. And a lot of it was based on his parents' beliefs. So in his world, in his family, that was as a boy growing up, that was what was important. This is what you had to do. Males in the family had to be providers. They had to do so he learned that act of service was really important. So he was working his buns off to provide, and actually she didn't care about that. What she cared about was having him there. So you can see how they were speaking different languages, and they've never had, they've been married for something like 20 years, and they've never sat down and had that conversation, because each of them assumed that the other one thought the same. So it's really easy to see how misunderstandings and communication, and it doesn't matter whether it's your husband, your partner, your friend, your sister, again, we assume your children, you know, we assume that everybody's the same as us, and then we're all different. So it's useful to think about, and quite often you can get clues in how people respond.
I was going to say,
So
how can you identify other people's priorities?
have a conversation. Quite often you can, it's things like there will be people who always remember birthdays and who take great trouble to find gifts that are just encapsulate, you know, the person they're buying that gift for. And there are people who, I'm sure you've all been in the situation, or is it just me, been in the situation on Christmas Day where you've opened a gift and you've thought, really? Really? My husband, my ex-husband, bought me a kettle one Christmas.
Obviously thought
It's like,
you needed something.
excuse me? You bought me a kettle. Why? And what was really funny was, great friends of ours, he was quite upset with my response, which was, you know, you might be wearing the kettle any minute now. And he said to his friend, I don't understand, Jenny's really upset. I bought this kettle for Christmas and she's really cross with me, because apparently it means I don't care. But it was she said I listened. She said a few weeks ago we needed a new kettle. I can't win. And he said, you know, his wife, Harriet was really upset with me. He said, I bought her step ladders for Christmas. And I said, did she want step ladders for Christmas? He said, no, but she'd asked me to decorate the bedroom. And so I thought it was logical. So my act of service was to buy her the step ladders in order that she would appreciate that I knew that she wanted me to decorate the bedroom.
Maybe it's a man thing, because a friend of mine, for her 40th, her husband bought her a set of kitchen knives, which understandably she wasn't happy about. So for his 40th, a year later, she bought him a knife sharpener.
And quite often, you see, if somebody bought me really expensive knives, I'd be quite happy with that.
I mean,
There's a difference.
but she didn't ask for them, and she said, it's like my 40th, and she said, I'm going to stab you with one of them.
Yeah.
Give me any more rubbish presents like that.
But it's so obviously gifts weren't their primary love language, were they?
No.
So you can see. But again, it's about it's about having those conversations. It's about saying what matters. You know, what matters to me. So that the lady for whom quality time was really important, she'd never sat her husband down and said, actually, this, you know, you working away is killing me.
I think the the one about the gifting actually works in business quite a lot, because I've been in business development for quite a while, and we had a team in North America a few years ago that were trying to get a meeting with a particular person at Verizon, who are like a telco.
Telephone company, aren't they?
And they tried and tried and tried. And I was over there on a visit, and they were telling me that this chap that they wanted to try and get to see. So I did a bit of Googling or research on him. And then I sent him a jar of peanut butter and with a comp slip, and could we have a chat? And he phoned back the next day, because the first brand he ever launched was peanut butter. So I made sure I sent him the same brand, but it was 27 years apart. But nobody had ever sent him a jar of peanut butter, let alone the first jar he ever worked on. And things like that can go an awful long way to cut through, you know, the sort of gatekeepers.
And I think it's about, as ever, it's about being, all of the languages have the potential to manipulate. So make sure that, you know, what your underlying principle is authenticity, and being, it's not just about say manipulation. It's coming from a place of you know, authenticity, and that you're doing it because you genuinely care about them, rather than oh, this will get me a contract. It's not that I'm suggesting it, but you know, it's that because people will see through very, very quickly.
Oh no, I ate the peanut butter first.
And I think
it in the jar.
there was no peanut butter. I think it's also that thing about, you know, we use love in Chris and I were talking about this earlier. You know, we use love as a word in so many different contexts, don't we? So we say, you know, I love peanut butter. I love the summer. I love whatever, Bon Jovi, whoever it is. And then we use it to describe behaviour. So you can understand why it's quite complicated. So it can be misinterpreted. You know.
Well, one of the examples I've seen whilst we've all been in lockdown and people that have employees that are working at home, a few companies have been sending out sort of gifts and hampers and things to their furloughed employees, which I thought was brilliant. I thought that was really a really good, a nice touch.
Yeah. You know, we all want to feel, you know, valued and secure and significant, and you know, those are all other basic human needs, and love's the thing that connects them all, because if you feel loved, then you feel secure. So in a world that's uncertain, and you know, we're in a world where, and I think in lockdown, you know, that emotional bank account is kind of, we're working with a much smaller balance than we would normally have. So that kind of, it's very easy to tip into the red. So being intentional about making sure that you're topping up that emotional bank account is really important, and understanding that somebody can come from a completely different perspective than you. You know, yes, you might be financially secure. Yes, you might be safe. Yes, you might be healthy. But actually, if you can't hug somebody, and you can't hold somebody's hand, and you can't see your mum, or you can't see your grandchild or whatever, actually that's a really hard place to be. We've had my own youngest son, but other people have, you know, had to cancel weddings, and somebody had put on their social media that they were devastated that they'd had to cancel their wedding or postpone their wedding, and somebody had responded and said, "You should be so lucky, that's all you've got to worry about." And it's like, actually, putting yourself in the shoes of somebody, you know, cancelling a wedding, I can tell you, is a really, really traumatic and horrible thing to have to do. You know, and our brains are complex. We can, just because you're sad about having to postpone something that's been a year in the planning, and you know, taken months and months of saving and organising, doesn't mean that you don't recognise it's a global pandemic, and that people are dying. But actually, you can. It's not one or the other. You can think about both things at the same time, but it doesn't take away from the emotion that you're feeling, or the loss that you're feeling in that particular situation. And I think it's really easy for people to go, oh, well, if, you know, oh, you've only got that to worry about. And that closes people down. And if people are closed down, there's nobody listening and nobody noticing. And Emma, you said at the beginning, it's much harder to notice if we're only on the phone. It's harder to pick up those if somebody's closed down, because what happens is we shrink and we shrivel and we go underground. And that's when, you know, that's when people's mental health really starts to go. So understanding what your love languages are and how to fill up that bank account will help you cope, thrive inside. And sorry, we're slightly over our time. You've got your You're muted, Chris.
Yeah. No, thank you, Jenny. Anybody got any questions for Jenny? I like the thrive inside thing. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I have a question. What about giving? Is that part of the acts of service?
Sorry, giving.
Giving, yeah, you said receiving gift. What about giving?
Giving is giving out. Sorry, I should have said giving and receiving is gifts. Yeah, but acts of service.
Okay.
So yeah, so the receiving of gifts I think is also the giving of gifts because it's both sides.
Right. Okay. You know,
But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a note. Thank you.
I think
But
that's
it
a
does
really
come
good-
into acts of service as well sometimes.
I think it's very useful, the emotional bank account and why blokes get it wrong all the time. Actually, it's a very good kick up the backside.
Well, but what's interesting because I looked to see if there was any evidence for whether any of the love languages were more prevalent with gender, and actually they're not.
Okay.
So it's as likely. So Chapman says that actually he likes to think of that their gender. There isn't any. He did say he hadn't. There isn't any evidence that that they're gender specific. So actually, you can have the split of those love languages isn't gender specific. There are plenty of women who get presents wrong.
Is there any of these languages that are more prevalent than others?
No.
No?
I think there's a societal, again, I haven't done the research, but I would suspect that there's a societal, in some societies, they might be more obvious.
Mm.
But I think the actual, and also I think that there may be which is why sometimes you get it wrong, is if as a child you develop a love language and in the way of parenting means that love language isn't valued, and so you then have to learn another love language. So it might be that you only discover your true love language later on. So it might, I'm just trying to think of an example. So it might be as a child that your primary love language is time. But if your parents, it's acts of service, then actually they might be saying, I haven't got time, I'm too busy, I haven't got time, go and play by yourself, go and amuse yourself, children should be seen and not heard. I'm stereotyping a bit, but you know what I mean. So actually for that child, quality time is like, oh, it's not okay. It's not okay. Quality time isn't recognized as valuable. So they might then feel that actually what they learn is that acts of service is what you should. So you get into the shoulds, and you must do this, you should be doing that, this is how it is, and that's a lack of understanding that there are different languages.
Do you think that in times of crisis, these are accentuated?
Yeah.
in people and changed in terms of potentially their priorities? Because if you haven't got physical touch and physical touch is your primary language,
You have to find another one.
Yeah.
As I said, most people have two. So for example, mine are physical touch and quality time are my top two, both of which are quite hard in lockdown. Yeah. So
has everybody got their top two?
Anybody want to share them?
I'm definitely a bubbling brook, but when I meet people from a different culture and the language is a bit sort of strange, then I turn into this deep pool, because you obviously have to listen more because you don't understand what they're saying. Well, you have to interpret it,
Yeah.
what they're trying to say. So I actually enjoy that bit. And then obviously giving beer to Chris regularly is part of my life, really.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Helen.
well, that's great.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Helen.
Sorry to shoot. Bye.
Bye, Helen.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I like
well,
gifting. I like sort of doing that.
So giving and receiving of gifts is maybe one of your top ones, David.
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I go, yeah, it's okay, but it's not a. Yeah.
I'm definitely physical touch
Yeah.
and probably words of affirmation. I'm very much a huggy person.
Yeah.
Which
And it's
obviously
hard, isn't
you
it?
can't do at the moment. So I mean, I
Yeah.
don't go around hugging random strangers when I can, but you know, I'm very much a physical. Like, you know, when I have a conversation with someone, someone has to just put your arm on your hand on their arm or something like that.
Yeah.
That's very much me.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to be careful in the workplace, though. The guy from Ted Baker was ousted for hugging his colleagues.
So I'm a virtual assistant. I work on my own.
Thank goodness.
I sit hugging myself all day.
But I think it is. I think it's But again, that's brilliant, and because if you, if physical touch is your primary love language, there can be an assumption that again, it's back to the dialect, and it's about the time and the place, and the relationship that you have, and learning, you know, what's acceptable. And I was talking with a colleague the other day, and I was saying how much I didn't like lockdown, and she was saying, I love it. She said, because people are always in my face. And people are always too close. They're invading. I love 2 meters. She said, I hope 2 meters distance stays forever, because that's about the distance I like to go, you know, from people. So it's about understanding what that love language means to you and how you interpret it. Bye-bye, David. Thank you. How you interpret it, and how you make it work in different workplaces. And checking out people's assumptions, which is what Emma said earlier, that checking understanding.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, like I said, I wouldn't do it unless I knew the person. That wouldn't be you know, I wouldn't do it to someone I've just met after 30 seconds.
I might be quite tempted next week. It's like, oh, there's a random stranger who stopped still.
I've got to say, one of the best things about lockdown for me is that we're not doing this continental kissing anymore, because that confuses me.
Well, some do it twice and some do it 3 times.
Some people don't do it at all. It's like,
I know.
It's no protocol.
Well, and Anique will know the proper etiquette on that one.
Yeah, well, I don't do it anymore either.
Well, it's all going to be elbows, isn't it, and feet from now on. So.
No, elbow.
Good stuff.
Excellent. Well,
thank you, Jenny. Appreciate
I'm just conscious of time. Didn't want to
that
run
was
over
very
the hour.
interesting. Yeah, I've made copious notes. You know, it's very good. I just want to know, when he gave you was it a toaster or
Kettle.
a kettle?
Kettle.
Did you divorce him there and then?
No, it took me quite a while. I did mine. I mined for the shine, but no, it did eventually. I didn't cite the kettle. I didn't cite the kettle as unreasonable behaviour.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Well, Jenny, thank you very much.
Thank
That was
you,
brilliant.
Thank you.
Lots of fun, lots of great
Pleasure.
stuff to think about. Really interesting. Very good. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Nice
Lovely
to
to meet
see
you all.
everybody. See you all again soon.
Bye.
Take care now.
Bye.
Bye bye.